So I'm here to talk about something that is often sort of a hot topic, and that is a horse that travels behind the vertical. And by that I mean the horse's head, the plane of their forehead and nose is past 90 degrees with the ground. It's in toward their chest more than 90 degrees. It closes the angle of their throat. And it is something that you see a lot in reining horses, in dressage horses, but there is a whole, I think, very valid school of thought that says it is a bad thing. First of all, it's not normal. Second, it has some consequences. So let's talk about why being behind the vertical is a bad thing. Well, for one thing, when your horse is back behind the vertical, you have basically lost him. He can only bend so far, and if he just turns to mush and bends in almost to his chest, he can actually evade you in that position. Now, the dressage people in particular, and the reiners to a degree, use that captive position to their advantage to push their horse around. That is why you see a lot of dressage riders holding their horse really tight with a tight noseband that has a section that goes actually down below the bit and clamps their mouth shut, because otherwise the horse wouldn't overflex like that. He'd just open his mouth, which is where you get the dreaded blue tongue, which is a real thing. Somebody hangs on a horse's mouth that hard with their mouth clamped shut. After a bit, the tongue will come rolling out and it'll be cyanotic. It'll be blue, deprived of oxygen by having the equivalent of a tourniquet applied to it by that unyielding rein pressure. So that's not good. Physically, it is not good when a horse is overflexed like that, because they can actually do damage to their upper cervical spine, just at and just behind the pole. And also, they can damage your trachea. A horse actually gets less air in when they're bent back behind the vertical, especially in the extreme positions you see some trainers move their horses into in schooling sessions in particular. The other thing that happens when your horse is way deep, they're functionally visually impaired. They can see much less. When their head is up, even in a semi-flex position, they can see pretty clearly what's going on around them. But you overflex them and you take away a lot of their vision. That's one reason why some of the horses that have been ridden a lot in hyperflexion get pretty spooky, because they can't see the world around them. This gelding here is made with a high neck. He looks around at the world, and he also feeling some flies right now. He looks around at the world, and when you deprive him of that, he would go from being a horse that rarely spooks at anything to very likely being a horse that is very hyper aware of things that he can't see that scare him. So now, having said how bad this is, you have to get your horse to flex, and you want to get him to right around 90 or not quite 90. It is way too easy sometimes to get past that. This horse he was born braced. He's extremely stiff by nature. It's his mindset. It's a little bit his conformation, the way his neck's made. So he tends to want to carry his chin up and his back hollow. So I'd put him in the bridle pretty hard, and over time he started feeling pretty good. Then I watched some videos back and realized, yeah, he felt good, but he was way behind the vertical, which isn't where you want him. So I'm gonna put him in that negative position. Probably this is a good place to see it, where he's extremely hyperflexed. Now, when he'd get to that point, I'd recognize it. But short of that, you can also have that behind the vertical problem, or that position with all the attendant problems. and you want to avoid that because of the reasons I mentioned. Plus, if you're just riding out across country, it is counterproductive to ride your horse even that hard on the bit that they can't look around. It's just doesn't make good sense. So what do you do when you have a horse that you've got doing that to correct it? Well, let's talk a little bit about what causes it. I don't like admitting this, but part of the cause was I was using more hand than leg. See, I'm using very little leg and quite a bit of hand right now. And see where his head goes? And he's using that hyperflex position to evade me. And I can't blame him because in essence, I've taught him that that's a safe place to go. So the most basic fix for that is to minimize your hand and maximize your leg to where your horse finds the bridle instead of you going to him and bringing him back and overflexing him. So I'm going to trot him around a little bit and show you what I mean. The other thing I would change and have changed, I have him in this bridle, which does a really good job of gathering the horse up. It's got a long shank, it's got a good angle to the shank. It tends to get a horse's face under control if they're a little stiff. But it is also a bit where you can bring a horse back behind the vertical pretty easily. I used it on him today because I wanted to demonstrate the horse behind the vertical pretty extremely, and I knew I could with this bridle. So I'm going to trot him around a bit, and I'll show you what I'm doing to kind of counteract that. So I'm going to ask him to go forward, but even though I want him to go forward collected, I'm not going to gather him up like that, because see where his head goes. Instead, I'm going to ask him to go forward into the bridle. And if I need him to be a bit more collected, a bit more engaged, I'm going to send him forward with my legs. I'm not going to try to change his head position with my hands, because you would get that overflex position again. But once you have that occur with your horse, it's all too easy for it to become their go-to position. And actually it becomes a kind of an evasion that they've learned you really can't do a whole lot about unless you go through this somewhat more laborious process of really just going back to your basics and doing things the way you should have done in the first place. I've had this problem with two different horses, and they're both strikingly similar. They're, sorry Slim, sort of crude, stiff horses that really were resistant in the bridle. And in an attempt to break them loose, I found myself probably overusing my hands because they were so stiff in the face. I see he's looking to get down there, so I'm going to use some leg on him. The other thing I'll do sometimes is, if he gets a little deep, I'll leg yield him, and that will tend to pick his head up. See where his head goes? His nose comes out, and now he's just a little bit ahead of the vertical if I'm reading this right. And the problem is that this can feel pretty good when they get back behind the vertical. The horse feels soft. It feels kind of safe and secure, but it's not right. And it's all too easy not to recognize when it happens because it's somewhat subtle. So there he's going along, and I'm going to move him to the outside a little, see if he'll pick up his nose without getting stiff. See, it's still a balancing act with a horse like this who wants to be stiff. That feels pretty good there. And then when I stop him, I don't want him to brace, and I also don't want him to get behind the vertical. Now, you notice he's got his head up looking around. That's This horse's nature is to look at things. He spooks at nothing, looks at everything. If I persistently took that away from him by riding him behind the vertical, he would begin to get more spooky. So I guess another place that you can really get your horse backed off behind the vertical is when you're backing him up. So again, what I'll try to do is not to pull him back, because if I get him like this, see where his head goes? I'm overusing my hands, and he goes behind the vertical. But if I use more leg, he stays pretty much on that vertical line. He tends to get a little behind even when you're not pulling on him. That'll come out as the other things come out, but the backup is a place where you can get your horse giving in the face, but be sure to use some leg too, or you'll wind up with the kind of problem that I had with him. See, he likes to drop his nose in behind the vertical when he backs up. That may be a little harder to get rid of, but you can see, I hope I'm on the right path with him. I believe in doing these videos. When I've done something wrong, it's kind of a learning moment for me, and maybe I can turn it into a teaching moment for the next person who maybe can avoid doing that with their horse, so they don't have to go through the process of fixing it, or worse yet, just riding in that bad position, doing the horse some harm and not really advancing him the way you want to. So those are my thoughts on getting a horse behind the vertical. I'm not proud that I did it with him, but it gives me the opportunity to show how it happens, why it happens, what it looks like, and hopefully how to get rid of it. So I hope that'll help you to avoid making the same mistake I did. If it helps you, use it. Till next time.